Chapter 32 Essay Writing. An essay is a structured piece of writing. It is mainly about this single topic. There are three parts of any essay: the introduction, the body, the conclusion. Among these three, introduction and the conclusion show what this essay is all about, and the body has all the details. The introduction. It is the part of an essay which tells about the topic of the essay. It is the part that gives a map of the essay as a whole. It is the first paragraph, but in essays of 2000 or more words, it can be extended to 2 paragraphs. To write the essay introduction, check what the topic is about and explain how you perceive that topic. The body. Body is the part that has all the information related to the essay. It is the part that is present between the introduction and the conclusion. When you write the body of the essay, you are not restricted. You can write about the topic as much as you like and can take it to diverse paragraphs. The conclusion. This is the final paragraph of the essay. To write the conclusion of the essay, you summarize all the details briefly and in a terse manner. Sample essays. Man and environment. Certainly this is duty, not a sin. Cleanliness is next to godliness. John Wesley. The problem of air, noise and water pollution is assuming serious proportions. Increasing industrialization is playing havoc with the environment. Industrial wastes, smoke and other gases are polluting the air in a hazardous way. Apart from industries, the density of traffic is also contributing to air pollution. The emission of smoke and toxic chemicals has been raising the level of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. Permissible limits of noise pollution have been exceeded in the cities of Kolkata, Delhi and Mumbai. Air pollution is responsible for respiratory ailments, tuberculosis, skin allergy, eye ailment, several types of cancer and mental retardation of children. Proliferation of chemical industries has accentuated the problem. There are even more dangerous chemicals in use in the country than MIC of the Union Carbide factory at Bhopal. The water of rivers get polluted largely because of discharge of untreated industrial wastes and municipal spillage and drainage of pesticides and fertilizers. All these have adversely affected their self-purifying mechanism by destroying their natural aquatic species. Exhaust from automobiles is a significant source of air pollution. A large number of vehicles emit 3 to 4% of carbon monoxide, which is dangerous to health. Increase of chemicals in the atmosphere causes acid rains hundreds of kilometers away. These rains damage the soil, destroy vegetation and aquatic species in river and sea. They also corrode buildings. The thin layer of ozone in the atmosphere is a form of life-sustaining system. It cuts our ultraviolet rays and allows the heat generating infrared rays to reach the earth. But due to industrialization and consequent pollution, the rate of depletion of the ozone layer is large. Its inability to absorb ultraviolet rays may lead to greenhouse effect and widespread incidence of cancer. Marine pollution is yet another problem caused by the discharge of sewage and harbor waste in coastal waters. Oil pollution arises from tanker accidents, refinery effluents and oil pipelines. This results in the destruction of marine life and poses a threat to our ecosystem. Nuclear pollution threatens life more than any other pollution today. Accidents can happen in nuclear plants, and when these happen, these can be catastrophic for large sections of the people. Nuclear radiation endangers the entire life support system: plants, vegetation, animals, water, air, and human health. Apart from all these pollutions, a serious threat to the globe arises from the pollution of outer space. Space debris has become a reality on account of the litter and garbage of thousands of space objects, dead satellites, spent rockets, motors, and nuts and bolts. The release of gases by rockets has adverse effects. Re-entry of large objects into the atmosphere may also affect radio communication. Thus, the ultimate victim of every kind of pollution, directly or indirectly, is man himself. Humanity today stands puzzled. A disaster threatens mankind in the near future. In just 100 years, air may become unfit for breathing, while water may become unfit for human consumption. Scientists today are busy finding out ways and means to fight this terrible hazard of pollution, but they have not so far succeeded in their mission. In the recent past, the Supreme Court of India has taken note of increasing pollution in the country. In several judgments announced by the court, it has directed the people to see that, as far as possible, pollution of air and water is avoided. Vehicles of all types have been required to conform to certain fixed norms in the matter of the gases being added by these to the air. Similarly, factories and other commercial units have also been asked to stick to the anti-pollution norms laid down by the government. Local bodies have been asked to use better hygienic conditions. All these steps are likely to go a long way in fighting out the menace of pollution, but a lot still remains to be done. Village life versus city life. God made the country, man made the town. What wonder then that health and virtue should most abound and least be threatened in field and groves. William Cowper. How right William Cowper was? Life in a village or in the countryside is a life in the lap of nature. It is a life full of peace and pleasure. It is free from the hurries and worries of city life. It is free from hypocrisy, competition, and vulgarity. It is full of health and joy. In the extremely artificial and mechanical life of today, country life has come to assume an importance of its own. The modern man, brought up in a city, is all the time busy in earning and spending. He is a worshipper of the goddess of wealth. He is completely dead to the beauties of nature and is out of tune with it. The glittering lights of the artificial lamps and the piercing music from the man-made machines make him dead to the beauty of a cold, soft moonlit night or the melodious songs of a nightingale. His entire life is full of artificiality. He cannot find books in running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. The villagers lead simple lives. They have their own harmless recreation. They do not go to clubs or hotels. They merely sit under shady tree and chat away their time. Some of them sing folk songs. Village girls enjoy dancing and singing. They led happy, noble, and virtuous lives. Life in villages, no doubt, has its darker side also. There are thousands of villages in our country that are still without proper facilities of electricity, drinking water, roads, schools, or hospitals. There are no sanitation facilities and most of the villagers are always exposed to terrible diseases. These are the reasons why a large number of villagers are migrating to the cities. Life in cities has a charm of its own. It has several advantages. We have better educational facilities available in the cities than in the villages. Job opportunities, too, are more numerous in the cities than in the villages. Again, town life makes one more alert, more active, more wide awake, more energetic, and shrewder. In towns, people are less prejudiced, less narrow minded, less ignorant, and less superstitious. There are also some advantages of town life. First, town life is very tiring because of the helter-skelter, feverish activity, and tremendous din and bustle present in towns. Secondly, town life is generally much more expensive than village life. Thirdly, fresh air is not available as much to a townsman as to the village folk. A man living in town is totally cut off from the beauties of nature. Keeping all this in view, it is ideal for a person to live at a place where he can have a judicious combination of the maximum advantages of both, the urban as well as the rural life. In other words, a house situated in a village but conveniently near a large town is an ideal place for living. One should try to have the best of both of the worlds. Life in a college hostel. Students get their education in schools or colleges either as day scholars or by living in the hostels attached to their schools and colleges. The system of living in hostels away from the parents is not a new one. In ancient days, Indian students had to stay away from their parents in the ashrams of their gurus till they completed their education. They used to be under the complete charge of their teachers during their educational careers. In many cases, students had to go to far off places to get higher education. Life in the hostels today is, of course, much different from the life in the ancient ashrams or other seats of higher learning. It is not as disciplined today as it used to be in the olden days. Students are sent to the hostels to devote themselves to their studies with a single-minded attention. They are expected to put their heart and soul into studies. They are put under the charge of a superintendent who is supposed to look after their interests and comforts. But it is generally seen that many students go astray and take to several evil courses. Hostel life has its own advantages as well as disadvantages. It trains the students to learn to live in society. It teaches them the art of corporate living and inculcates in them a spirit of cooperation. Boys who live together in a hostel get to know each other. They form friendships which always help them in their later lives. They mix together and know the habits and nature of one another very well. If the superintendent of the hostel is a good man, discipline in the hostel is good. This discipline gives good training to boys. They learn to obey the rules. Thus, in future life, they become good citizens. Life in a hostel enables the students to have a free exchange of ideas. This develops a feeling of self-confidence amongst the students and enables them to face the odds of life in a better way. Boarders live together so they learn many good things. They learn to give and take. They also learn to help those who are in trouble. They attend to the sick. They sympathize with the poor. Moreover, in the hostel, boys live far away from their parents. This teaches them to help themselves and to stand on their own feet. Hostel life has its disadvantages also. Boarders do not get the advantage of home life. They do not get the training which the parents give to their children. They do not get the love and personal care of their parents. This makes them homesick at times. They feel the absence of their parents when they are ill. A day scholar is always in touch with his or her home, but a boarder is cut off from it for months at a stretch. With the increasing attitude of indifference and callousness on the part of the hostel warden, life in a hostel has become a real danger. Innocent minds of young students are likely to led astray by antisocial elements. It is in the hostel that many students pick up bad habits. The malady of drug addiction is already taking a heavy toll in several hostels. Evils like smoking, drinking, gambling, homosexuality, and the like are spreading fast in the hostels where the grip of the authorities is loosening day by day. Every year, some rich and careless boys come to live in hostels. They never study. They talk, laugh, and disturb others. Thus, it becomes impossible for many boys to stick to their books. They feel disturbed. They cannot devote all their time to their studies. Sometimes, good boys get into bad company in a hostel. As a result, they fall into bad habits. They begin to smoke and drink. They get addicted to various drugs and intoxicants. They become cinema fans and waste their time. They become fashionable. They waste the hard-earned money of their parents. In spite of all this, life in a hostel has many disadvantages to offer. It is hostel life only that makes young boys self-reliant, dutiful, brave and social. On the whole, the life of a boarder is better than that of a day scholar.